Have we got a question?
I don't know, was your hand up? I think not.
No, I always have a question. But you know how we've been talking about this whole point forward problem, trying to convert the university into a thing that gives you a career or gives you a job, right? And was up with talking with the governor today. We had a bunch of workshops, 5 different groups, right, talking about different issues. And in the energy and environment one, a lot of people were saying, well, how come we can't have more government support for regenerative farming, farming small scale, that doesn't harm the environment, that doesn't, release so much carbon and pollute the rivers and so forth. And it was an open question, but I think what you were talking about, how people are expected to graduate here and get out, right, and go somewhere, probably Denver, where supposedly the jobs are there and you'll be able to pay off your student loans someday. But what if we reorganize society so that people who want to do small-scale farming and stay in Stevens Point and employ all of the things they learned in biology, right? Just have society configured so that those people get a living, right? They don't have to sell commodities, and they don't have to have a side job, and they don't have to worry about paying off their student loan, because there are no student loans anymore. They're all wiped off the books. How could we do that? How can we get there?
So I think Wendell Berry and Wes Jackson both speak to this issue. Wendell Berry is obviously a big proponent of sort of living close to the land, right? Farming techniques that aren't destructive, farming crops specifically that are sort of in tune with the environment, not just the harvest season, but what actually grows, right? So, and this is why I think there's a radical shift here, because you have to change your diet, you have to change the way you produce the stuff that's going to go into your diet, and you have to change the way that people relate to sort of reproducing that, right? Farming techniques, the deindustrialization of life, which actually Nietzsche will refer to, I think, in the gay science as the de-deification of life, right? So we have to start reining in the idea that we can play God and break free from our connection to the earth. And so I think to the extent that there are conversations happening, right? Like it can't just be a bunch of farmers individually doing it. It has to be a collective effort. And so it has to be collective farming in the right sort of way, right? And it can't just be a handful of people who do all the work and feed everybody. It has to be a communal effort. And this is where I think understanding our relationship to our neighbor as one that is not just cooperative, but coexistent, right? So that the need to produce food is a need that we all participate in. The way that we consume is something that we do together. And I think you can take that out of farming and really do that with any sort of thing. And this is where I think Marx got it right and then got it wrong, right? Because he doesn't talk about nature as anything other than resources. So Marx has embedded in his idea of the world a valuation of the world that is just monetary, even though he doesn't talk about it necessarily that way. He already has adopted that capitalist idea that this is just stuff to own. If you think about other ways of knowing, and go back to ecological reflections, right? We talked about sort of like Aboriginal dream time in Australia. We talked about ideas of sort of Native American relationships to the world where you can't own the earth, right? Like there's just no way to really talk about ownership of existence, right? And this is where I think the individual revolution that makes eco-essentialism possible is the complete overthrow of the individual self, right? It's a self-motivated sundering of the idea that I matter more than or equally than certain other persons, but not all other things. right? So if you were in a town hall with Katrina Shankland earlier, somebody mentioned the attempt underway right now, the wholesale slaughter of the wolves in Wisconsin. Those wolves are our neighbors as much as each of us, right? The fish in the streams, the forests themselves, right? All being has a claim on its being. And so if there is a need to respect life, the idea that we can plug in human life and make a rational argument work is exactly why I think we're sort of chasing our tail today, trying to figure out how to move forward into a better future. Because we haven't figured out how to undo the damage of believing we're special and different. Right? And that goes all the way back to some of our conversations previously about Adam's relationship to God at the moment of creation. And I could not have known weeks ago that was going to be manifested here in this way, but I think that's where the problem begins.
I kind of have a two-part question. So, going back to your conversation, or your little bit about talking about how we're embedding ourselves in technology and like whether or not that still constitutes us as human. And you said like, that asks like the begs question of why do we have this desire to overcome humanity? Could it be less of a desire to overcome humanity, but more of a desire to overcome that animalistic part of that humanity, like the fact that we're also animals and that we are kind of attached to our material bodies? Because I feel like so much of the motivation behind artificial intelligence and those sorts of technologies has been this transcendent vision of being able to work ourselves with material and kind of regain that sort of Adamic perfection and finally kind of enter into this sort of transcendent realm.
No, I think that's right. There's a way, I think, of thinking about what we're doing physically to manipulate the world to allow us to overcome it. And whether the motivation is longer life or a more transcendent existence, right? The ability to access Google directly, right? I don't need a machine. I can just, the little chip kicks in, right? And I can just think Google and I got all this stuff, right? It's like some Matrix level stuff, right? Where like I can learn to fly a helicopter instantly by like downloading the manual. And I think that whole idea that science and technology can motivate a correct conversation about how to be in the world is rooted in the idea that science is an epistemic project of overcoming. But it's never been, I don't think it's ever really been meant to be that, right? Science has been about discovering the way the world works and how to maybe, like we talked a couple of weeks ago, Francis Bacon, right? Like making nature reveal her secrets. The witch does the same thing. But the witch doesn't do it to dominate nature. The witch does it to deepen the intimacy of the connection to nature. And here I use witch in a gender neutral way, right? I use wizard, witch, whatever, right? And I think that this is sort of the disconnect. Like, what we're trying to overcome is sort of our place in the world, where that place is not what we aspire to be, right? So there's that striving to become. But we never really know what we're trying to become. We just have a social narrative of becoming. This is Hegel's whole project, right? Like all of history is about becoming better, realizing the highest ideal, right? Becoming the nation, becoming one with God. His whole project is one of becoming. And I think that wherever that happened, right, the idea that we are in a process of becoming, which is a narrative that starts all the way back in Heraclitus, in the pre-Socratic age, right? That was a mistake, because the way that we are supposed to inhabit our individual existence is one of belonging. And we don't strive to belong. We strive to dominate and separate and control by defining and naming and directing and exerting an incredible amount of scientific pressure on the world to do our bidding. Science was never Nietzsche's idea of overcoming, right? It was dancing and singing and frivolity and sort of drunken partying. It was never meant to be this sort of epistemic ordering of the world that lets us transcend. And I think that's where, if you look Hegel forward, we really started to deviate, because we started to think of science as the way to be. And it was never meant to be